Opel Omega B is the second generation Omega executive car produced by Opel between 1994 and 2003, and it replaced the Omega A and was sold both as a four-door sedan or limousine and an estate called the Caravan. In some markets, it was also rebadged, for example, as the Vauxhall Omega in the UK, but also in the USA as the Cadillac Catera between 1996 and 2001. The Omega B was a rear-wheel drive, longitudinal engine executive car aimed at buyers who wanted roomy comfort with traditional rear-wheel drive dynamics. And Opel launched the Omega B, often called the B1 internally, in 1994. In August 1999, a major facelift and interior overhaul produced the Omega B2, internally called the Omega B2, because it was a facelift. Exterior-wise, the Omega B carried a clean, understated executive car look, and from the outside it had a long bonnet, a wide stance, a smooth aerodynamic surface, and basically that were a step forward from the boxier Omega A. Opel deliberately designed the car to look modern but not too flashy, appealing to business users and families alike. And the B1, the early cars featured rounded edges, a chrome-trimmed grille, relatively large glass areas, which later didn't change that much, but also this had a soft curve along the body, sometimes also with plastics being revealed on the cars itself. And the Caravan or the estate version stood out as one of the roomiest wagons in its class, with a square and practical rear end that made it a favorite for families and fleets. Details such as a flush-fitting headlamps, integrated bumpers, and a long wheelbase gave the car a stable, stretch appearance. Inside the Omega B prioritized space and comfort, as the cabin was very airy and roomy, with generous rear legroom that rivaled many luxury cars. The dashboard was functional and driver-oriented, with controls positioned within easy reach. And seating-wise, the seating was wide and comfortable, with comfortable seating being available in either cloth or leather, depending on the trim, which made the Omega A relaxed long-distance cruiser. And practicality-wise, the saloon had a large trunk on itself, but the Caravan even offered much more cargo space, uh, with even the possibility to fold down the rear seats. And some of the features on this, depending on the trim level, buyers could enjoy climate control with wood effect or rear-wheel trim, premium sound systems, electronically adjustable heated seats, electric windows throughout the whole car, and also the car was notable for some safety equipment such as airbags, but also pedestrian-wise, many features fitted within the car. And for the car itself, you also had ABS brakes, traction control, basically appearing on the car across more trims as the year went on. As said before, in August 1999, Opel launched the facelifted Omega B2, which introduced a significant update inside and out. Some exterior updates included new, sharper headlight design with cleaner lenses. Although, if you look closely, you could still see that it basically is the same headlight amount on the car as with the B1, just positioned a bit cleaner with all of the new bumpers and stuff around it. You also had a new revised grille and bumpers, as said before, with less chrome, less plastic visible for a cleaner, more modern look. Also, the mirrors were redesigned, with basically still the indicators in the same place, but now being clear indicators instead of orange, which the earlier model had. And also the rear light clusters and rear lights themselves were updated, in contrary to the front lights or the headlights, as these were now somewhat completely different than before. The interior also got a heavy, in my opinion, facelift, as the whole dashboard was entirely redesigned with a more horizontal layout and a wide central air vent running across the top. You also had some improved switchgear and ergonomics, giving a more premium and modern feel, and also some higher quality materials with better fit and finish compared to the B1, with, in my opinion, also being very visible and noticeable and comparable to the Vectra C at that point. The layout was very comparable to the Vectra C of the dashboard. On the right side, you had the buttons, for example, for the heated seats or for the hazard lights, and in the middle center, you had climate control and also a radio. And also, the car received some technical updates in engine forms. For example, introduction of new petrol engines, a 3.2 liter V6 or a 2.2 petrol, and updated diesel engines. The B2 facelift kept the Omega competitive in the executive segment by giving it a more up-to-date style and interior, while also modernizing the powertrain lineup. And Opel basically positioned the Omega B in the executive E segment, comfortable long-distance cruiser, a practical family executive car and a platform that could be tuned for higher performance. For example, with the MV6, basically, talking about it later, or also some sport models. And the Omega had many engines during these two phases, being petrol or diesel, and the Caravan most of the time was around 1 second slower to 100 and had a top speed of around 5 kilometers an hour lower, and used around half a liter of petrol or diesel more per 100 kilometers. And in these times, the automatic transmissions also could be included, being around a second slower. As basically between 1994 to 1991, as basically between 1994 to 1999 for the Omega B1, the starting engine was a 2-liter injected engine. There were no more carbureted engines in this car. And basically, this 113 horsepower engine had 178 newton meters, giving the car a 0 to 100 time of 13 to 14 seconds and a top speed quite reasonable at 188 to 195 kilometers an hour. In my opinion, in contrary to the Omega A, the fuel consumption was much lower for any engine basically, as the fuel consumption for this engine was 8.5 to 8.6 liters per 100 kilometers, and this engine basically was available throughout the whole B1 phase from 1994 to 1999, as it was after that basically somewhat succeeded by the 2.2i, which we'll talk about later. Of this engine, you also had the 16-valve engine, as the 2-liter I basically was an 8-valve engine, having 134 horsepower and 185 newton meters, basically having a 0 to 100 time of between 11 to 13 seconds, so it was much faster, also having a higher top speed of 195 to 210 kilometers an hour, while having a comparable fuel consumption of 8.5 to 10.2 liters per 100 kilometers, basically being the 10.2 for the automatic. And this also was available up until 1999, since 1994, the whole B1 phase. You also had some V6s available, as you had a 2.5 liter V6, basically having 168 horsepower, 227 newton meters, giving the car a higher 0 to 100 time, or a better 0 to 100 time of 9.5 to 11.5 seconds, and also a higher top speed of 218 to 223 kilometers an hour. And basically because this was a V6, the fuel consumption also was higher at 9.1 to 11.5 liters per 100 kilometers. And this engine also basically was available during the whole B1 phase, 1994 to 1999. This basically was a somewhat in-between performance engine, as you also had a 3-liter V6, basically being the top of the line for the B1, also called the MV6. This had 208 horsepower, 217 newton meters of torque, giving the car a 0 to 100 time of 8.5 to 9.8 seconds, and a top speed of 230 to 243 kilometers an hour. Because this engine was a bit bigger and also still a V6, it had a fuel consumption a bit higher than the 2.5 liter V6 at 9.6 to 11.5 liters per 100 kilometers. And this engine also was available throughout the whole B1 phase, but also was used a bit in the B2. Diesel engine wise, in contrary to the, for example, Senator A, Opel still aimed diesel engines in its line-out or layout for the vehicles, as this engine started with a 2-liter DTI. In contrary to the TDI known for Volkswagen, this had 99 horsepower, 205 newton meters, and a 0 to 100 time of 15 seconds, as this engine only was, as far as I could find, available with a 5-speed manual, basically being aimed at only business users. This had a top speed of 186 kilometers an hour and a very good fuel consumption of 6.1 liters per 100 kilometers, which actually is very good, knowing that the car has a length of around 4.9 meters. This was available later in 1998 to 1999, as beforehand a 2.5 TD, basically being from BMW sourced inline 6 turbo diesel, was available with 128 horsepower, 215 newton meters, and a 0 to 100 time of 12 to 12.5 seconds, giving the car a higher top speed of 195 to 200 kilometers an hour, while also having a higher fuel consumption of 7.4 to 7.5 liters per 100 kilometers. And this basically was available also during the whole B1 phase. So basically, almost all of these engines were available for the whole phase from the beginning. B2 engine wise, it was a bit more diverse, as some of these engines were taken from the B1 and some of these were actually new, as all of these engines started with the 2-liter 16 valve, which continued for the B2 and was taken out of the B1, which basically had the same specifications but a higher fuel consumption from 9.3 to 10.2 liters per 100 kilometers, being available between 1999 to 2000, so basically being stretched 2 more years. Later, this engine was somewhat succeeded by the 2.2 16 valve engine, having 142 horsepower, producing 205 newton meters of torque, having a better 0 to 100 time of 10.5 to 11.5 seconds, and having a higher top speed of 206 to 210 kilometers an hour. Therefore, because it was a bigger engine, the fuel consumption also was higher at 9.4 to 10.2 liters per 100 kilometers. And basically, this engine also was available during the whole B2 phase of 1999 to 2003. And basically in 2000, it succeeded the 2-liter 16-valve engine. You also still had the 2.5-liter V6 taken out of the B1, also having the same power, but having a higher fuel consumption at 10.4 to 10.9 liters per 100 kilometers. And basically, just like with the 2-liter 16-valve engine, this was available for the first production year of 1999 to 2000, as after that it was succeeded by the 2.6-liter V6, being new for the Omega B2. Having a higher power output of 178 horsepower, 240 newton meters, but having comparable 0 to 100 time and top speed specs at 9.5 to 10.5 seconds, and a top speed of 224 to 229 kilometers an hour. While being less fuel efficient at 10.7 to 11.5 liters per 100 kilometers, being available since 2000 to 2003. You also still had the 3-liter V6, which continued in the B2 from the B1, having the same 211 horsepower 3-liter V6, while having a higher fuel consumption of 10.4 to 11.1 liters per 100 kilometers, this time being available between 1999 to 2001. As in 2001, this engine got somewhat succeeded by the top-of-the-line 3.2-liter V6. And this had 215 horsepower, although some sources state that this could also be 225 to 230, as Opel basically on paper said it had 215. But it could be much higher, as some people claim that the car was much more powerful with this engine. So this engine had 290 newton meters of torque, giving the car a 0 to 100 time of 9 seconds, which actually wasn't that great. Not being that comparable to, for example, a top-of-the-line BMW 5 Series, which, besides the M5 would be, for example, the 540i, not really that comparable. But for example, comparable with the 530i or 535i, it could be somewhat comparable. The top speed of the car was 240 kilometers an hour, and because it was even a bigger V6, the fuel consumption also was higher at 11.8 liters per 100 kilometers, and this was basically available between 2001 to 2003, and basically was one of the last engines to be introduced for the Omega B. Diesel engine wise, in my opinion, a lot of engines changed. as you basically still started with the 2-liter DTI, this time being available since 1999 from the beginning up until 2003. Having the same power output, still available with only a 5-speed manual, but the fuel consumption changed a bit between 6.1 to 6.6 liters per 100 kilometers. Yeah, as said before, being available to 2003. But later also the 2.2 DTI was introduced, basically being somewhat comparable to Opel's petrol 2-liter 16-valve and 2.2-liter 16-valve, as 2.2 DTI was basically also a 4-cylinder direct injection turbo diesel, but having more power at 118 horsepower, 280 newton meters of torque, giving the car a more reasonable 0 to 100 time of 12.5 to 13 seconds and a higher top speed of 195 kilometers an hour. And yeah, basically because this engine was a bit bigger, the fuel consumption also was a bit higher at 7.1 to 7.2 liters per 100 kilometers. And also the years this was available in was a bit later, from 2000 to 2003. The 2.5 TD BMW sourced engine also was still available from 1999 to 2000. Basically this was a 12-valve engine because it was an inline 6. And basically not much changed, although only the fuel consumption was a bit higher, 7.4 to 7.5 liters per 100 kilometers. And this was available from one production year, 1999 to 2000, as after that Opel received BMW's 2.5 DTI, or yeah, basically still the TDI, from BMW with 24 valves this time. This engine actually wasn't as powerful as it was in BMW's, because BMW made an agreement with Opel that it wouldn't source engines that were as powerful as in their BMW's itself. But this engine still had a big increase in power, from 128 horsepower to 148, because of this only being 24 valves this time. The torque amount also increased, in my opinion, fair bit, from 250 to 300, also having a better 0 to 100 time of 10.5 to 11 seconds, also having a higher top speed of 206 to 208, while actually having a higher fuel consumption of 7.6 to 8.6 liters per 100 kilometers, being available since 2001 up until the end in 2003. And Opel basically offered all of these engines in trim levels like the base, sport, elegance, executive, for example. And basically a special version of the Omega B, in contrary to the Omega A. You didn't have that many interesting versions. For example, the Evo 500 wasn't there, or the Lotus Omega, but you did have the Omega V8 sourced from Opel themselves. And this basically was a bold but unrealized attempt to create a true flagship version of the Omega B2, being somewhat comparable to a BMW M5, which basically was developed in the late 1990s on the B2, and it used a 5.7 liter V8 engine related to GM's North American units, producing 315 horsepower and 420 newton meters of torque, basically positioning the Omega a bit closer to BMW's 540i and E430 Mercedes of the era. And this gave the car a 0 to 100 time of only around 7 seconds and a top speed of 250 kilometers an hour, being regulated with an automatic regulator. And to fit the engine, Opel reworked the front structure, strengthened the suspension and brakes, and planned subtle exterior tweaks while keeping the car discreet and executive look. And although several prototypes were built, the Omega V8 was cancelled before production, as officially due to high costs for homologation and emissions compliance, and unofficially GM feared it would overlap with Cadillac's role as the group's luxury brand. Production of the Omega B ran from 1994 to 2003 in basically 2 phases, with the important B's facelift in August 1999. And between 1994 and 2003, there were 797,011 Omega B's made, being somewhat comparable to the Opel Omega A. But basically Opel succeeded the Omega B with the Opel Signum, or basically the Opel Vectra, depending on how you look at it, as the Opel Signum was a completely different body style. But the Opel Signum and Vectra later led to the Opel Insignia A. And the predecessor basically was the Opel Omega A. Very straightforward. And as said before, some competitors, including the upper European executive cars, were the BMW 5 Series E39, the Mercedes-Benz E-Class W210, the Audi A6 C5, but also some models from Volvo and Peugeot, for example, the Peugeot 607, 606. You had a lot of different engines and models that competed the car. Thanks for watching this video. In order to be able to upload more videos in the future, please consider becoming a member of my channel or sending a super thanks on this video. Also, don't forget to like or subscribe for more. Don't forget to check out this playlist with many interesting videos covering various parts of the automotive industry, and I will see you in the next video.